¿Qué es qué? ¿Y qué es cuál? ¿Y cuál es la diferencia? Ese es el tema de este episodio de Spanish Dojo. Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural episode of Spanish Dojo, where we'll work to hone your Spanish speaking skills and make you sound more like a native speaker. The topic for today is the difference between the words que and cuál. I think when we all first start learning Spanish, we think of these very simplistically as being the translations of the English words what and which, and that'll get you pretty far as a general rule of thumb. But you'll soon realize that you run into situations where that rule seems to break down, and for good reason, because it's not really as simple as that. So what I want to do today is give you a more precise rule or a more precise model that you can follow that'll take care of those situations where things don't seem to match up with the what-which paradigm, okay? And the idea here is I want to get you away from thinking through that English filter, okay? Stop thinking about the words que and cuál as meaning what and which, and start thinking about them as the words that they are, que and cuál, and the situations that those apply to in Spanish without trying to look through that English filter or that English lens, okay? So what is the difference between these words if we're not going to compare them to what and which in English? Well, que refers to when a person is asking for a type of description. They want something explained, or as I said, a description of something. Whereas cuál is going to refer more to a choice. Okay. Now I know that sounds a lot like the English definitions of what and which, but there are situations where they're not quite the same, and that's what I want to show you today. Okay? You may have heard Spanish speakers say things like, ¿Cuál es tu nombre? Or ¿Cuál es la fecha de hoy? Or ¿Cuál es tu número telefónico? Right? In each of these examples, notice that I used cuál, whereas in English, which would sound kind of odd here. We would normally use what. Okay? If I translated those three questions into English, I would say something like, what is your name? What is today's date? What is your phone number? And notice it's what in every case, whereas in Spanish I used cuál. So these are good examples of where the que is what, cuál is which paradigm doesn't really work. Okay. So then the question becomes why? Why in Spanish would that be cuál if that's supposedly connected to this concept of which? And as I said, cuál has to do with indicating a choice out of a list of options. Okay. Now that sounds like which, except that in English we're much more strict with which than what Spanish speakers are with cuál. Okay. When we use which in English, it's usually because there's a very clearly defined list that we're choosing an option from. Okay. And that's not the case in Spanish. The idea is if you are picking a choice out of a list of options, that list doesn't have to be real. It could be completely hypothetical. So let's go back to our examples. Okay. If I ask you, ¿Cuál es tu nombre? What is your name? Essentially, I'm not really asking you to define or explain what your name is. I'm not asking for descriptions and definitions there. I'm asking you to make a choice out of all the possible names that you could possibly have on this earth. I'm asking you to tell me which one is yours out of all those options. And this is what I mean when I say that you're making a choice from a list, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a real list. It can be completely hypothetical. So if there were a directory somewhere that listed all of the possible names that people could have in the world, you would be choosing the one that's yours and telling me which one it is. Okay? The same goes for the date, today's date, or a phone number, right? We're not really looking at a list of all the possible dates that today could be, but technically that's kind of what we're doing in an abstract sense, right? You're choosing the combination of numbers that make up today's date and telling me which combination that is. Same with a phone number. Out of all the possible combinations of numbers that could go together to make a phone number, you're telling me which one is yours. And for that reason, in Spanish, these questions use cuál. Okay? ¿Cuál es tu nombre? ¿Cuál es la fecha de hoy? ¿Cuál es tu número telefónico? Okay? Which one is your name out of all the possible options? Which one is your phone number out of all the possible options? I know that sounds kind of weird in English because we don't think of it that way, but that's how you need to start thinking about it in Spanish so that you use que and cuál correctly. Because if you say things like, ¿qué es tu nombre? Or, ¿qué es la fecha de hoy? Or, ¿qué es tu número telefónico? That sounds very odd in Spanish. It sounds as if you're trying to ask for some sort of description of what the person's name is or an explanation of what the phone number is, and that's not the case here, okay? So you need to start thinking of them in those terms, and that'll help you distinguish between que and cuál without having to think through that English filter, which will sometimes fail you, okay? Now, everything I've said up to this point applies when we're using nouns. So you'll notice that in all of my examples, I had cuál followed by the verb es, right? And so I'm using a noun, the noun cuál standing all by itself, not modifying anything, not acting like an adjective, okay? When you use it as an adjective, this is where it actually gets easier to make the choice, and the choice is que. It's always que. Okay, so if you put that in front of something, like, let's say I want to ask you which movie you want to see. Okay, now you may think, he's asking which movie I want to see. That would be a choice out of many options, and you're absolutely correct. So if I said something like, which one is the movie you want to see, and I had that which stand all by itself, or which is the movie you want to see, then yes, cuál would be the option. ¿Cuál es la película que quieres ver? But what you have to understand is when you use it as an adjective, and what I mean by that is when you take que or cuál, or in English what or which, and you put it right in front of another noun, so it's modifying that noun, it's defining it, it's acting like an adjective, you have to use que for that. So when that's the situation, it doesn't matter if you're choosing, if you're making one choice out of a list of options, or if you're asking for a description, none of that matters. When it acts like an adjective, que is the one to use. So a couple of examples. If I said, which movie do you want to see? Or which car are we going to take? Or which number did you get? Like maybe we go to the BMV or something and you have to take a number. Right? In those cases, and I think on that last one, we might even use what in English. What number did you get? You know, you could maybe go either way. In all of these examples, because the word's acting like an adjective, then you should use que. So I would say, ¿qué película quieres ver? Or, ¿qué carro vamos a llevar? Or, ¿qué número te tocó? Right? And notice that in each of those examples, I used que. Now, there are options. You're making a choice out of a list of options, so it would normally be cuál. But because I'm using it as an adjective and putting it in front of that other noun to modify it, I use que. Okay. Now, I'll make one last little comment here that it is technically possible to use cuál as an adjective, but you're talking about some really specific exceptions to the rule that don't happen very often, and it's kind of beyond the scope of this video. The main point of this video is I want to give you an idea of how these two words are perceived in Spanish so that your objective can be to stop thinking about them as translations of what and which, and stop trying to make a one-to-one comparison, que is what, cuál is which, because that's going to break down on you and it's going to cause your Spanish to sound a little bit odd. Okay? Instead of that, use this other model where you think of que as being requesting descriptions, explanations, definitions of things, okay, something more in depth. And you think of cuál as being a choice out of a list of options. But the important distinction there, as I've said before, is that that list of options doesn't have to actually be in front of you. It can be completely hypothetical. But if you're giving someone just one choice, one option, one piece of information out of many possible ones, that's where you use cuál. Okay. And that should help you use these two words a lot more precisely than following the beginner's general rule. Okay. So that's all for the episode today. I hope that helps. If you like this information, I just want to let you know that by the end of this year, recording this in 2019, I'm planning on publishing a book that will be available. And if you're watching this video, there should be a link in the description. If you're watching this video after 2019, there should be a link in the description to take you to that book. If you like this and you want a lot more content like this, check out the book, check out more episodes on this channel. Also, as always, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.